Hello to our audience around the world. Thanks for joining us today for a webinar on this hot topic of reputation management. One of the most important initiatives for hotels today is to move up in their rankings on TripAdvisor and increase visibility on the world's largest travel site. A recent study conducted by Cornell and Revinate, the leading guest feedback and engagement platform, unveiled a simple way for hotels worldwide to improve on TripAdvisor. And we're going to be diving into this interesting study today. We have an absolute fantastic set of case studies from actual hoteliers and research from a leading academic institution that will be relevant. We'll make it very practical. It won't be homework. There'll be a lot of examples for you to borrow from. And we're going to have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to be asking questions. I'm Sean O'Neill, editor of Tnooz. I'm speaking to you from New York City at the moment. I'm joined by the man who's lucky enough to be my boss, Gene Quinn, CEO of Tnooz in Connecticut. That was a joke, Gene. We're starting our presentation today with a fantastic lineup, an all-star cast. I've been very excited about this. We have Kenny Lee, Vice President of Marketing for Revinate, Chris Anderson, a director at Cornell School of Hotel Administration, speaking to us from Ithaca, New York. We have Brian, who is a head of industry at TripAdvisor, industry relations, sorry. We have Glynis, who will be joining us as a VP of marketing from Landmark Hotels Group, and Tara, who will be joining us as a corporate marketing director, corporate marketing coordinator for IDM Hospitality. You'll be hearing from them very shortly. Just a bit of housekeeping, 3 things. First, Tnooz is recording today's webinar, and we'll make a replay available to all participants along with the slides. So if you can't participate and listen in for the full hour, you will still receive access to the video and slides afterward by email. Give us a day or two. You'll then be able to share that link with your colleagues to get some internal buy-in for taking some action. Second, we will have a question and answer session at the end. When you have a question, please use the box on your dashboard and type in your question. You'll see in your GoToWebinar panel in the little right-hand corner, there's the words questions. If you click that, it drops down, and you can type in and ask a question. I will read the questions and vet them and then ask the presenters for them. We'll have a 5 to 10 minute Q&A at the end. Third and last thing, we're asking some poll questions today of the audience so that we can adjust our presentation to better match the type of audience we have here and to better tailor on the fly and improvise for who is listening. So our first question is, where are you located? If you can let us know whether you're in North America, Europe, Latin America, or Asia Pacific. We'll be having four poll questions today, and we appreciate your participation. Given the time difference, you'll notice that we'll be getting a lot of people from North America and from Europe, but because we've seen that we have a global audience that's registered around the world, will be sort of listening and probably getting the slides and watching the video later. So the results are about 40% of you are in North America and 45% are hanging on in the late afternoon in Europe. Thank you. Welcome to you all, wherever you are in the world, in Asia or Latin America. We're very grateful for you taking the time to listen today. Our next question is about which industry segment that you are in. If you could share with us, are you in hospitality? Are you in an online travel agency? A tech provider, if you're in the leisure, business agency, corporate travel manager, or in the other category. We're expecting to find a lot of you will be in hospitality, in the hotel business, hotel leaders, revenue leaders, reputation management, experts, general GMs. And results, we see that about 3 out of 4 of you are in hospitality today, but some of you are also in tech providers and OTAs. We're very grateful no matter what you are. We think there'll be a lot of actionable advice based on this that will be of use to you in your professions. I'm now going to ask Kenny to say a few words, please, about today's event.
Great. Thank you very much, Sean. Just like on YouTube, I'm the 30-second ad you've got to hear before getting to today's presentation. At Revinate, we're really excited to be co-hosting this webinar with Sean and Jean and the great folks at Tnooz. I just want to say that it's been a great year for us at Revinate so far. A few months ago, we reached a major milestone. We now have over 30,000 hoteliers using Revinate Reputation to manage their online reviews. We also have thousands of the same customers using Revinate Surveys. And since we became a TripAdvisor Platinum Review Collection partner, we've seen interest in our survey solution just grow even faster. And then last, our relatively new CRM plus email marketing solution, Revinate Marketing and Engage, we're really helping hoteliers run some amazing targeted campaigns that are helping them be more relevant to their guests and achieve more direct bookings. So last thing before I pass it back to you, Sean, for those who are active on social, we're using hashtag Revinate webinars to share the webinar and great data points that you'll be hearing on public social channels. So thank you.
Thanks, Kenny. Yeah, hashtag Revinate webinars, all one word, and also feel free, everyone, to ask questions in the poll box as you see there. Our focus today will be next on managing your reputation on TripAdvisor. Brian will walk us through some best practices, and then we'll dive into a recent study conducted by Cornell and Revinate, the full results of the study, and how encouraging guests to share feedback on TripAdvisor can drive significant gains in a property's performance on TripAdvisor and even get increased occupancy. For example, properties using Revinate Survey solution, which encourages guests to write reviews on TripAdvisor, experienced a 3 times average increase in review volume. So we'll be getting into some of this details from this April 2016 study, and then we'll have some case studies from Landmark Hotel Group and IDM Hospitality Management. So I'm now going to hand this over to Brian at TripAdvisor.
Thanks very much, Sean, and thanks to everyone else on behalf of TripAdvisor. We're really grateful to join you here and to share this information. So let's get right into it. So if we could have the next slide, please. The results of a recent study conducted by Atmosphere Research Group reveal that the link between hotel engagement and performance on TripAdvisor, by analyzing the performance of 12,000 hotels in the top 25 destinations on TripAdvisor, Atmosphere found that there are common traits of all the top performing hotels. These hotels have at least one active verified owner in the TripAdvisor Management Center, 10 or more management photos, and respond to at least 25% of the reviews. These highly engaged hotels receive nearly 4 times more average page views per month, which is a great measurement of traveler interest and engagement with the hotel. They also have higher popularity index ratings in their destinations and see 30 to 40% more engagement with commerce links when compared to their unengaged hotel counterparts. Next slide, please. The same research also found that these high-performing hotels use and benefit from a virtuous circle of guest engagement to make constant improvements and drive their TripAdvisor results. This includes encouraging all guests to write TripAdvisor reviews of their stays, monitoring those reviews, sharing that feedback with operational teams at the property, and making changes based on that feedback. Over time, this can lead to an improvement in the quality, quantity, and recency of the property's reviews, which can drive more visibility on TripAdvisor and in turn helps more travelers find and book the hotel. Next slide, please. TripAdvisor's popularity index is influenced by quality, recency, and quantity. Essentially, more reviews are better than fewer reviews, good reviews are better than poor reviews, recent reviews are better than older reviews, and TripAdvisor looks at the consistency of all these factors over time in order to provide an accurate representation. It's important to note that management responses do not directly impact the popularity ranking calculation. Next slide, please. Analyzing traveler behavior on TripAdvisor, we see a direct correlation between the time travelers spend on a property's listing page and the following factors: the number of photos, the total number of reviews, management responses in the past year, number of reviews in the past year. Note how important that recent activity is in traveler engagement, those past year data. Next slide, please. So let's shift from research data to things you can do right now on TripAdvisor. Next slide, please. Since reviews are so important, there are a number of ways to encourage guests to leave feedback and to provide your business with those reviews. Integrate a TripAdvisor review form at the end of your guest satisfaction survey from one of our official partners like Revinate. This allows you to seamlessly collect both private survey feedback and public review feedback in one flow with low effort. Send a standalone post-trip email to your guests, thanking them for their stay, and ask them to provide their feedback to future travelers on TripAdvisor. You can add a submit a review button directly on your own web pages. You can order review business cards, stickers, and flyers to remind guests to write reviews. And you can even add a review submission tool to your own Facebook page. Next slide, please. Revinate is a platform partner of TripAdvisor for review collection services. Platinum status is granted to the top tier of review collection partners that demonstrate excellent technical integrations and consistent review conversion performance. Next slide, please. Remember the research showing how important your management responses are to travelers. When an occasional review is not positive, you have the opportunity to share your side of the story. And 85% of TripAdvisor users agree that a thoughtful management response to a bad review improves their impression of the hotel. So even if you get an occasional negative review from a past guest, your thoughtful response can lead to better results with future customers. Next slide, please. Another very simple tool that encourages interaction and advocacy from past guests is our question and answer Q&A feature. Q&A allows prospective customers to ask questions that can either be answered by you or a past guest. This has a dual benefit of being both helpful to the future guests and giving them a transparency to help them convert over to booking, while also encouraging past guests to advocate for your brand in a really natural way. Like this example here where the past guest answers the question and raves about the hotel facility. Next slide, please. So we've covered quite a bit of ground in a really short time today. To get even more information on the topics we've touched on here, as well as many other areas that will help you connect with travelers, I'd recommend visiting our TripAdvisor Insights portal for more access to resources, tips, research, and best practices. And don't forget to follow TripAdvisor on Twitter at TripAdvisor B2B for the latest news and industry insights. Now back to you, Sean.
Thank you, Brian, for that covering that. We have a poll question here. So for hoteliers, are you integrating TripAdvisor review collection into your post-stay survey program, either with Revinate Surveys or another provider? Yes or no? We have a lot of hotel general managers, VPs and directors of marketing, VPs and directors of operations, and corporate marketing people here, so it's interesting to see the results here. We're seeing that about 2/3 of you are saying yes, that you have integrated TripAdvisor's review collection with some technology provider. If we could have those final survey results, it's about 60% of you have said yes, and about 40% of you have said no. That kind of makes good sense, and it's sort of a natural segue to lead into our research from Professor Anderson at Cornell. If you would like to take it from here, please.
All right, thanks a lot. I'd like to first welcome everyone to the webinar, and then also express my thanks to both Revinate and TripAdvisor for partnering this study. This study, like many others we do, is freely available from the School of Hotel Administration website at Cornell University. I am actually the director of the school's Center for Hospitality Research, and this project serves as, a pretty good sample of what we look to do as we try to sort of put together studies that individual hoteliers perhaps can't do on their own, as we integrate data across multiple sources with the goal of providing sort of impactful insight into sort of topical ideas. And so with that in mind, I'm going to sort of go through a couple aspects of this study. So the first part of the study was done jointly with Revinate, and we go through a series of A/B tests where we actually look at sort of encouraging reviews, right? So at some level, if we let guests on their own sort of decide whether or not they want to post a review, we tend to get these extremes of very happy or very sad guests posting their comments. Whereas if we're facilitating the collection of reviews, the idea here being we get a more representative sample of what guests feel about our property. And so that's what we're trying to show with the first part of this project. The second part of the project is really facilitated by work with TripAdvisor, where TripAdvisor is basically providing two different archival samples. And here we look at the impact of responding to reviews upon subsequent reviews and their scores. And then lastly, the impact of responding to reviews upon revenue and conversion generated at TripAdvisor, whether that's through Instant Book or through Meta. All right, so again, I'd like to give my thanks both to Revinate and Brian at TripAdvisor, as they've both been great partners and hopefully will continue to do so in the future. So next slide. And so, part of this goal, as I alluded to earlier, is, what happens if we facilitate the collection of online guest feedback? So partnering with Revinate, we look at a series of hotels globally, basically 80 different properties. And we have this, what I'll call this A/B test or two-period test. In the first period, we'll think of that as status quo, where hotels are engaging with TripAdvisor on their typical pattern. And then in this B period, where these properties are now encouraging or facilitating reviews through Revinate Surveys, right? And so then what we do is we compare this B period to the A period across a series of traditional TripAdvisor metrics, as well as our traditional sort of hotel performance metrics, ADR, occupancy, and RevPAR. So next slide. And these results were I guess pretty impactful, right? Probably a little bit more extreme than we had initially envisioned, right? But basically, through encouraging of reviews, we obviously get a lot more review volume. Here we see that review volume actually increased threefold, right? So as part of this study, we're really comparing hotels to their comp set, right? So we're looking at how the average number of reviews a hotel is generating versus the average number of reviews that they've specified as their competitors as part of our traditional sort of STR approach to comp set analysis. The second part of this is not only are they getting more reviews, but these reviews are of a higher score and a larger percent are more positive. And as a result of that, their popularity index is increasing, right? So as Brian alluded to, right, we're looking at both the freshness of those reviews, the quality of those reviews, and the number of those reviews. And all three of those things are going up. And as a result of that, these properties experienced rather dramatic shifts in their popularity index in as short as 6 months after the launch of Revinate Surveys. And then surprisingly, we see the impact of this upon hotel performance. Right? At some level, so the shift in review scores and review volume and popularity index, we expect that there be a lag between that and firms actually capitalizing that by pricing power and pushing rate or driving demand. And so what we saw is, a pretty dramatic increase in occupancy in this B period, where hotels on average experienced about a 1% lift in occupancy. Some individual hotels in the sample of 80 pushed rate, right? And others decided to push occupancy. But the net of that, again, will be a push in RevPAR. We go on to the second part of this study. So next slide. Here, we're looking at two different data sets, and I'll go through these two data sets in sequence. Right, this first data set, we're looking at 3 years of review data, and we're doing that for two major US markets, New York City and Orlando. And what we're looking at here is the impact on a quarter-over-quarter basis of hotels engaging with TripAdvisor, so responding to reviews, and then what is the impact of responding to reviews upon subsequent reviews. Right, and so our variable of interest here, or our dependent variable per se, is the review score. Right, so our next slide shows us, next slide shows us some of the variance in how individual hoteliers are engaging on TripAdvisor. Right, so we see here that roughly 40% of hotels in our sample across these two markets are not responding to reviews, right? Whereas close to 15% of hoteliers are responding to all reviews, right? So we have these two extremes, roughly 3 to 1 of not responding versus entirely responding, and then we're kind of evenly spread here, all the way between 0 and 1, right? So we got the nice part of this is we get a fair bit of variance upon to what degree hoteliers are engaging with TripAdvisor via responses. Right, so next slide. So now that we have this sense, we can actually take this data on responses and look at the impact upon subsequent review scores at TripAdvisor. And so, as one would anticipate, you mean the more reviews that we're getting, the increase in score. So these variables here on the left, in the leftmost column are our attributes, and the right column is the percent change quarter over quarter in TripAdvisor score, right? So we see here that's consistent with the first part of the study, actually encouraging reviews, gets a more representative sample and increases that TripAdvisor score. But more importantly here, for properties that are not responding to reviews, so that subset of about 40% of those hotels, their average scores are about 91% or 9% less than those hotels that are actually responding to reviews. And then the last two rows here, so take it a bit further and say, well, okay, so here this 0.91 says, let's respond to reviews. And then these last two rows sort of focus on, well, what review should I respond to? And so basically, as the percent of the negative, so I have 10% of my reviews are negative. If I was to respond to 100% of those 10% of reviews, my TripAdvisor score would go up 2%. Now, if I respond to 100% of my positive reviews, actually my review score goes down. Right. So this is the first sort of part where, so yes, we're indicating it's important to respond to reviews, but here we're potentially saying not to respond to all reviews, right? That we definitely want to respond to those negative reviews, and then depending upon your mix, maybe respond to some of those positive reviews, but not all those positive reviews. Right, so the third part of the study, so next slide, and I'll come back to this in a second. So the third part of the study, now we're looking at not just the impact upon subsequent reviews, but what about performance, right? Trying to talk about these parts. So we're going to measure performance basically we're going to measure conversions or revenues that, whether they're MetaClicks or Instant Book, that are coming off TripAdvisor, right? So TripAdvisor is tracking these measures of revenue, right? So next slide. And so in this next slide, we talk a little bit about our sample. So we basically have data from four markets: Italy, UK, France, and Dubai. And this indicates the number of hotels in each of those markets and then mix those hotels that are actually fraction of hotels responding to reviews in these markets versus New York and Orlando. But we get a sense of at least there's some engagement happening here with TripAdvisor. And we're going to focus on the last, so these sort of columns 5 and 6 here, where we're talking about the average room nights and ADR of those room nights that are occurring at TripAdvisor generated revenue. And so we summarize that here in the next slide. And so basically, this is where sort of these last two parts of this study really come together, right? So on the leftmost side of our axes here, we have the revenue factor, right? So this would be the increase in revenue as a function of what percent of reviews that you're responding to, right? So basically, we think of our base case as hotels that are not engaging with consumer reviews, right? And then as we start to engage with consumers and actually respond to those reviews, our revenues generated at TripAdvisor are increasing. And they're peaking somewhere around 0.4, and that factor is about 2.2 times those who are not engaging. But interesting enough, after that point, we start to get these diminishing returns, actually negative returns, where after we reply to more than 80% of those reviews, we're actually worse off than not replying to any of them. And if we reply to them all, that's considerably worse than not engaging, right? So here we're starting to see this impact of sort of overload, right? So the first part of the study talked about let's encourage reviews. The second part of the study said, yes, let's respond to those reviews, but perhaps it's more impactful to respond to those negative reviews than those positive reviews. And that's further amplified here, where we're getting a sense that, yes, consumers want us to engage, but they don't necessarily want overload. And so at some level, we should be responding to all those negative reviews. And then potentially, as a function of your mix of positive and negative, perhaps some of those positive reviews, right, but not all of them, right? Clearly here we see that if we're at this right end of the spectrum, completely engaging, perhaps that has a negative effect, right? So let's go on to the next slide, and I'll kind of summarize those things, right? So what we see here is that, consumers want to know that we want their opinion, right? So engaging with something like Revinate Surveys is in essence telling consumers that we want to hear from them, we want their opinion, we're trying to improve our product or service, right? And then the second part of this is through responses, you're actually telling them that you're listening, right? So we're reading those reviews, we're replying to those reviews, and that actually has a further positive impact where scores are increasing as a function of that engagement. And as a function of that engagement, those scores increasing, you're increasing revenue generated at TripAdvisor, right? And even potentially even some of those direct bookings, right? My word of caution here is basically we don't want to reply to all those reviews, right? At some level, consumers want value add from the hotelier, right? And that value add is much easier when replying to negative reviews than positive reviews, right? So as a hotelier, I have a negative review. I can engage with that consumer and talk about how added sort of response. And then you think about replying to a positive review, right? So a simple thank you for their comments is really not value add, right? It's really not helping subsequent consumers discern the quality of your product, right? And so you have to be cautious about why consumers are at TripAdvisor, what they're trying to gauge from that content, and then how you can impact that engagement, right? So they're looking for sort of quality value add content, and I think that's much easier to provide through responses to negative reviews, and takes a lot more effort when replying to positive reviews. Not that it can't be done, but probably takes more effort. Right? All right, so I will pass it back.
All right, Chris, thank you for that. It's interesting that it may not be a value add to respond to a review if the review is positive, as long as the rest of that information from that 3 years of data. What we have now is our final poll. What is your top priority for marketing investment in 2016? If you could let us know whether it's guest feedback management, guest customer relationship management or CRM, more direct bookings and website conversion, loyalty marketing, or something else may be your top priority for marketing investment in 2016. This will be interesting data because we're very curious what's on the minds currently of hotel GMs, VPs and directors of marketing and directors of operations and corporate marketing directors, and as well as people who are in other tech booking. I'm expecting more direct bookings and website conversions are going to be sort of like a top priority. If we can have those poll results, please. Yep, it looks like more direct bookings and website conversion. About 2/3 of you have that as a priority. Guest feedback management has about 1 out of 10 of you, as well as CRM is for 1 out of 10. Plus, loyalty marketing is also an important thing that's on your mind. It's interesting. I was recently at High Tech, Revenue Strategy Summit, a couple of customer conferences for hotel groups, and there was a lot of complaining about the CRM tools. There's a lot of complaining about the hoteliers needing more tech to help with guest feedback management, which is a separate issue, and loyalty marketing, which is a separate issue. Glynis, are you surprised at all by these poll results, or is this in line with what you would expect, Glynis?
I was with you when you said that we would probably be surprised with the results. I think there's no question in everybody's mindset that more direct bookings and direct website conversions are key to success of any hotel. And I think this pretty much reads to it, but one has to also qualify that without guest feedback management, without a strong customer relationship management program, you're not going to see the more direct bookings and website conversions.
Right, right. Well, Glynis, I'll let you take it away with your case study, please.
Thank you for including McKenna Beach and Golf Resort, which really is the subject of the Cornell study and not Landmark Hotels Group. And the study covered the resort's performance up to 2014. 2015 numbers, as Chris mentioned, resulted in, for us, 12.2% increase in the occupancy index, which we were very happy with. Unfortunately, the hotel closed officially on July 1st as part of the schedule for McKenna Resort's redevelopment plans. This is a major redevelopment. And the closure has been postponed a number of times because of the successful performance of the hotel in the last 2 years, as shown in what Chris has indicated or Cornell study has shown in both. There is no question in our assessment that McKenna Beach and Golf Resort's success had a great deal to do with its TripAdvisor review and subsequent ranking. Landmark Hotels Group has a background of success with hotels we have operated, which have worked hard to ensure that their service delivery and sense of place and vision resulted in high destination rankings in TripAdvisor and other online review sites. We opened a hotel in Mexico City the same year that TripAdvisor was launched and embraced it immediately. The results from 4 years later, we were doing a 169 RevPAR index, and I attribute that greatly to our being part of TripAdvisor number 1, 2, and 3 ranking in Mexico City at that time. We recognized the tools very early on, and therefore, when Revinate presented us with the ability to collect data and reviews as well as social media, we jumped at that right away. And It saved, basically brought our social media review management coverage time down by 80%. We're looking at one tool. It helped us to set response goals, timely improvement corrections. As you notice, we have close to 39 users on our Revinate collection review program. So very involved by everyone on staff, including the chairman. Keywords from the reviews, not only for operations improvement, but also helped us to craft our keywords for search engine optimization and focus on what was important to consumers when selecting our hotel. In McKenna's case, location, added value, and above all, the sense of place through dedication to service delivery and a genuine spirit of aloha were of higher consequence than a dated product. It made ideal storytelling fodder and user-generated content. The guest survey tool was the next advantage we had working with Revinate, with a high repeat guest factor. Many of our guests loved the hotel and staff, but perhaps overlooked that they should review us on public channels. We were top 15 on Maui and in our destination, but knew we needed to increase the number of reviews to gain ranking. We did so with that program, and the next slide should show the success of that. And Chris, if you could take this over at this point.
Sure. So what we see here is sort of indicative of the first part of the study I mentioned. So McKenna was one of the 80 properties we looked at. And sort of in the middle here, around October 13, you see this sort of inflection point. And sort of the line before that is our A period. The line after that is our B period. And you kind of see the extreme here where McKenna was right around 11 in the market. And then basically at the end of our B period was at the top, right? So critical for a destination property like McKenna that basically unbranded, where consumers are really looking for content from TripAdvisor to help sort of reduce some of the uncertainty of that stay, and sort of really illustrates the impact here. Of encouraging and engaging with TripAdvisor. So we'll pass it over to Tara now, so she can talk about our second case study.
Sure, thanks. And thank you again to Cornell, Revinate, Tnooz, and TripAdvisor for allowing me to join you guys today. So let me just introduce IDM. We are a management and development company based out of Madison, Wisconsin. We specialize in independent boutique hotels, normally in like a secondary or tertiary market, kind of throughout the Midwest, often centrally located. Many of our hotels are part of community revitalization efforts. And our approach is to allow on-site management to be very entrepreneurial, which we found to work very well with the style of hotels we run and something we're very proud of. But one of our greatest challenges competing against flagged hotels in our markets who have steady business due to rewards points, or they just know what to expect. That it's kind of a comfortable thing for them to go to a Holiday Inn, which that's not our product at all. So part of our brand obviously kind of combats that challenge. But if we kind of go back to those key takeaway points that we were talking about earlier, one of the ways we differentiate ourselves is by making our review responses customized to the review itself. I'm not a cookie cutter response, so responding thoughtfully, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, to all negative reviews. Some of the neutral ones is a requirement for all of our hotels. We believe it goes a long way in the guest decision making during the shopping process. Another way we do this is with Revinate Surveys. So not only is the survey customizable, which is really great for us, but it also boosts our TripAdvisor presence and ensures that we stand out against our competition. So IDM, we've been working with Revinate for about 3 years now. We found it's a great tool for workflow management. So for example, the ticketing feature, we might have a general manager who is always kind of reviewing the reviews as they come in, and then he can say, ticket the housekeeping manager with one that, maybe there's a room cleanliness issue. And from there, that housekeeping manager can kind of take ownership of that feedback, operationalize it, and it kind of all trickles down. Same thing with their sentiment analysis feature, which we love. It creates kind of a word cloud of information about what's trending in terms of the different aspects of the hotel. So either the guest service, the room cleanliness, the location, and things like that. And this is information that we share with ownership every month. We just love looking at it and being able to be on top of it, because not only can we approach our owner and say, here's numbers that can say, maybe we need to replace these mattresses, a year before we thought we needed to, just because we're getting all of this feedback. But, it also helps us ensure that, we're providing the best possible product for our guests. And we also use Revinate for rate management. I think that they have a great tool that integrates with our STR report. But, even looking at the value ranking we get month to month on our Revinate surveys has been really useful for us in determining our rate management. Not only that, just having those rates helping our ranking is another huge part of that. And we feel confident making those decisions because of the tools that Revinate has kind of given us. So, as I said before, we've been working with Revinate for about 3 years now, and we've enjoyed it very much. They really encourage us to, give them any feedback we have, and we have brought them into the conferences that we hold for our GMs every year, and they've had one-on-one time with our GMs just to be able to say, this is how this product works, or this is what's new, and it's been really great for us to be working with them for as long as we have. So if we go to the next slide, you can kind of see that our results kind of differ a little compared to the McKenna Beach golfers. We're not showing here that our TripAdvisor ranking went up per se as much as our review count. And I think that's been great for us, especially because, not only have we talked about, quality and recency really contributing to your TripAdvisor presence, but for us, when we started doing the Revinate surveys, we had already been pretty high in our TripAdvisor ranking, but this has really helped solidify our position in the marketplace, having this enhanced amount of reviews going out all the time. And so for our hotels that have been number one in their market for a long time, we feel more confident about their place. And then for hotels that were maybe sitting at number two, after using this product for a while, they've slowly been able to push to number one. And it's been really great to see that and make us competitive with the marketplace from that aspect. All right, so I think I'm going to turn it over to Sean unless somebody wanted to jump in on that one.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Very good presentation. I think maybe we'll. Is there anything that you sort of felt, Chris, that you wanted to comment on what Tara was just saying?
So I think, she makes a very important point that, different suppliers are going to look for engagement across different levels, right? So as she alluded to, IDM had already had a strong presence, and the goal here was to sort of not necessarily do anything different other than to ensure that they maintain that position, right? So even hoteliers that are doing well across these platforms, they've got to keep their eye on the prize and realize that engagement is for everyone, regardless of where you're at, that there's this upside for maintaining that presence as well.
Fantastic. Next slide, please. So I think there's been a lot of material here, and we want to get into the questions section. So if you want to learn more and sort of reinforce and stay engaged, an opportunity to use these studies results and how to improve your TripAdvisor ratings, you can learn more at learn.revinate.com. There's a lot of online resource material there and learning resources. And so I think we'll now head into the Q&A, the question and answer session. We thank everyone around the world who has been asking questions in our dashboard here. I'll start off first with a question for Chris at Cornell from Andrew Gillespie. For the Cornell study, did the hotels that were included represent a range of hotel types, such as economy, upscale, luxury, or was the study focused on a specific type of hotel in those 3 years of data?
So for the first part of the study, we had a mix of chain scales, independents, as well as branded. And then for the other two parts of the study, we had entire markets, right? So at some level, the first one was a little bit more limited, but again, we tried to get good spread in what we had for properties. And then in the other two aspects, we had entire markets. So we had, a really good look at what was going on there.
Sean, I have a question for Brian, if I may.
Please.
Brian, I'll give you a sec to come off mute.
I'm here.
You've been at this a while at TripAdvisor, and I mean that as a high compliment as someone who's been at the top of the game here. A couple of years ago, there was a great push of many social media advocates for hotels to get their arms around hugging their customers. It's interesting that some of this data reflects that there is tremendous respect for explanations and self-deprecating criticism, but not so much respect for self-exaltation, which may have more of a commentary on what social media has become to the hotel industry, a tool as opposed to an excuse to communicate. Can you talk a little bit about how some hoteliers may feel it's a little counterintuitive not to beat yourself too hard over the head for a mistake and to thump your chest too much when you're proud of a good comment? You've seen a lot of this, and it's outside the statistics. I'm looking for what your impressions might be.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of variation brand to brand, and then what the independents do varies as well. And I think, as with all social media, this has to be an extension of your brand. And for that reason, some properties say, I just cannot imagine not thanking a guest for taking the time to write a comment. And one of the things I made note on during the discussion was a lot of properties use the private messaging field for that now. They realize that, as Chris said, there's a lot of hunger for explanation here, but the same thank you repeated over and over may not be helping the future guests and may look like a speed bump in some instances. So you see a lot of properties who have a policy to 100% private message every single guest who writes a review, and then to select which ones to publicly make that public response that is going to be helpful either in addressing a negative review or in adding color or extra information to the positive review. So you see that, but it's amazing. There are still some properties who, given all the data about the importance of management responses, still say, as a brand, we do not want to get into any public discussion of this. So even though we've been doing this for 16 years, it's still quite a variety, as Chris's data showed.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Brian.
I'll jump back in. We have another question for you, Brian. One of our listeners heard a rumor on the street that it can be a mistake to respond to every single review, in the sense that there's an actual penalty in some way for a hotel that does that in the system. This is sort of different from what we've been talking about with the study about what's advisable.
Yeah, there's a cottage industry of rumor creation on some of these topics, and absolutely not. There is no penalty to that, and I'm guessing somebody was probably extrapolating from some of this interesting statistical analysis and research that's been done. We do not impose a penalty, absolutely not. And just as I said, there is no benefit to extra management responses in the popularity calculation, any benefit or negative impact that accrues is based on what the traveler impression is of what all that content is. So it's not something we include in our calculation, but it is a part of your brand. And I also want to emphasize that there's anybody who's hesitating to get involved in management responses because you're afraid of doing it in a way that is not expert. You have the opportunity to replace any management response after any period of time if something has changed at the property, or you just say, I wish I had done that differently. That's your content, and you can replace that with something new. So, there's no penalty attached to it, and it's yours to update. So there's really very little reason not to join in.
Okay, thank you for that.
So Brian, this is Chris. I really want to thank you for that statement, because back when I was sort of presenting some earlier versions of this study, I had many hoteliers say to me, we have to respond, otherwise TripAdvisor is going to ding us. And so I really appreciate that sort of statement that management responses do not impact the popularity, but as we've shown, they're going to impact those subsequent reviews, and that will indirectly impact that popularity, but they're not factored into that. I think that's critical for the audience to take that with them.
Absolutely.
And to follow on that point, Stephanie Min has a question of whether, just to reiterate the point, make the point again, how often you reply to reviews have an impact on the popularity index, or relative to like numbers of reviews and the nature of the reviews that come back? Is there an impact on the popularity index?
No, the popularity index calculation is not impacted by how frequently you respond. The frequency of response is going to impact how future travelers see you, not your TripAdvisor ranking.
Okay, thank you. Glynis or Tara, we have a question from you, from Abby, and from Bonnie. They have similar questions. What are other ways to solicit guest reviews if a property is prohibited from specifically asking a guest to review? Bonnie has pointed out that they've tried billfold reminders, an app on Facebook, notes in their menus and documents around, but is there a way to sort of increase this if there's sort of rules about not specifically asking a guest to post a review?
This is Glenna.
Go ahead, Glenna.
Sorry about that. This is Glynis, and I understand, because we're dealing with, I have a hotel that is in a similar situation. There's not much you can do because you don't want to go against brand standards. However, I think it's the exposure of your, the ability to, whatever you do in CRM, if you're listing your social media, you should list the TripAdvisor icon as well. You should, on a one-on-one basis at property, remind the guests that, especially upon checkout when they're happy, is TripAdvisor, you respond to TripAdvisor, through our guest survey if you're with Revinate. I think on a verbal basis, especially in a leisure environment, they're more likely to do so. On a corporate basis, they're rushing out the door and getting to their plane. So I'm not sure if that precise works, but we do know that reinforcement that if we've done a good job, we'd like you to recognize us on a personal one-on-one basis helps.
I would agree with Glenna. This is Tara, by the way, that it's probably best sometimes handled as a guest touch point. I like thinking about reviews or eliciting more reviews, what have you. I approach it by saying, we invite you to review us. I think having that kind of mindset when you want more reviews is to say, we want to invite you, and using that kind of terminology tends to help to kind of personalizes the process more.
All right, that's very helpful. We're coming up on the hour, so we only have a couple of more questions here. I think that so questions from Mike and Valentina sort of were already addressed, but an aspect of what they seem to be saying is, and this is a question for Chris first. If is there a if it's fine for some of our listeners to listen to this study and understand it, but when they go back to their stakeholders inside their organizations, the resistance, sometimes you have an itch, you really want to scratch it. Sometimes if you're getting really positive reviews, it's very hard to resist the urge to sort of respond. Is there a balance that's okay to responding to positive reviews, sort of like an ideal percentage or proportional response that would not that wouldn't cause a decrease in our metrics?
Sort of, you mean, I guess you can look at it different ways. You mean, part of it is you need to think about the real estate, the review real estate at TripAdvisor, right? So if you're responding to a lot of reviews, then your response is taking up some of that real estate that the consumer is trying to utilize to help them, choose from Hotel A versus Hotel B. And so while, I think responding to negative reviews and indicating, how you're trying to improve that service disruption is hugely impactful. Yes, you want to reply to some of those positives in a way to sort of re-emphasize them. Obviously, if we're just responding to negatives at some level, that sort of may overemphasize them. And so as a hotel, you may want to respond to some of those positives, right? But once you get to, I think you definitely want to be less than every other review has a response. And again, it comes down to your mix of positive versus negative and how you balance that. I just don't, at some level, if you're replying to all those negatives, you don't want consumers to just think you have negative reviews, right? And so I think that's the fear that many hoteliers have in their mind, that if you're overemphasizing these negatives, you need to offset that by re-emphasizing some of those positives. And I think that just makes sense, right?
Yeah, that does make sense.
The key here is make sure you have value add in the response to that positive, right? Not just a simple thank you, but telling them what you've done to impact why they thought their stay was so positive, right? So again, think about value add in your comment versus just the curtness of it.
And, a lot of times when you're reading the positive, there's one sentence or something that is not necessarily a positive. So you have to be careful that you don't miss responding and personalizing that message to correct or to improve knowledge of a particular area of your hotel.
Okay, Brian, we have a question from Donna that's echoed by Ahmed. Are hotels allowed to enter guests into a prize drawing in exchange for any review?
Thanks very much for asking that. No, the answer is no, you are not. There cannot be any quid pro quo for a review. So no incentive, no thank you prize. That is a violation of our guidelines. And we do hear about those and try and work with the properties to get them removed. But there can be penalties even attached to that practice.
Okay, we will wrap up. We've gotten so many good questions. We haven't been able to answer all of the questions, but we will pass along the questions to our panelists so that they'll be able to hopefully some of them will be able to respond to them, so they won't be lost, even though we're not answering them here. Right, we want to thank everyone around the world for asking all of your questions. Again, I said we'll pass them on to presenters. We'd like to thank our panelists for the excellent presentation that they've given today. Everyone did a fantastic job. We really appreciate Revinate partnering with us on this webinar today. We will be sending out the slides and the video recording of it to everyone by email within the next day or two, so please keep an eye out for your email and feel free to share that with your colleagues. So thank you, and hope everyone has a good day or evening or night wherever you are around the world. Thank you again.